All right. Yeah, have a shot at it.
I've heard it. House Bill 237. Again, this is to try and prevent those individuals who may wear a mask while committing crimes, while being engaged in riots, trying to seek and conceal their identity while engaged in these activities, which may be dangerous and harmful to folks in our society. I know that there are some folks that are against this that may speak against it, but we believe this is a measured approach to bring back what was law prior to COVID for the most part. That was passed by our Democrat colleagues, and I thank you for having the idea, and we look forward to getting back to a better society. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Britt. Members of the committee, Senator Woodard.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm not a smart big city lawyer. I'm just a simple-minded country boy. So
I agree with you.
So since I've got a big city lawyer up there, I thought I was going to have a lawyer from a bigger city than Britt's from. But anyway, I read this bill and I'm trying to understand it, and so I guess I have three examples. One, I don't know, a few weeks back there was a protest over at the state capitol in support of House Bill 10. That wasn't relevant, but that's what it was. And a group of Proud Boys were there, and they were sporting their colors, black and gold, and they were wearing their balaclavas. And so that's one example. I'd love to know under this bill, because of the secret society piece, which I think they've self-identified as a secret society. If you ask anybody if they're a member, they always deny it, especially if they run for office. A second example, that same day, across the street, there were a group of peaceful protesters. One of them was a constituent of mine, and they were waving signs, and there was a little bit of shouting, but it was a fairly peaceful event. By all accounts, I think this constituent's healthy, and she chose not to wear a mask that day. She was healthy and didn't need to wear a mask for health reasons. And in the week since then, she's been doxxed quite a bit. Her pictures appeared on the internet, her name, her home address, her car with a license plate. And she chose not to wear a mask to this protest, while across the street, the protesters were masked. The third example I want to mention is a woman I learned about yesterday, a woman from Charlotte who had to have a double lung transplant just before COVID set in. And she was told by her doctors that she would probably have to take extra precautions the rest of her life. With the onset of COVID, she learned she had to wear a mask quite a bit. Since her surgery, replacing her lungs, she's had to be in the hospital over 2 weeks on constant IVs, just fighting off the illnesses that are just going to be part of her life as long as she lives. So she wears a mask almost all the time now when she's in public. She insists that her family and friends, when they visit, have to wear masks. So, Senator Britt, could you walk me through those three instances? Does this bill protect secret societies like Proud Boys? How does it protect my constituent who chose not to wear a mask but is getting doxxed? And how do we not go against or go after people like this woman from Charlotte who really, for medical reasons, needs a mask?
So I'll start with the issue of the medical reasons. Again, this has got to go back to the House, and we're still in discussion with the House on how to tailor the medical exception to this mask policy for folks who may suffer from communicable diseases, as well as folks that we want to ensure that this doesn't violate the Americans with Disabilities Act. So there's going to be some tweaking along the way once this gets over to the House as far as that goes. It does not protect folks that wear masks, such as the Proud Boys. Those activities would not be allowed. As far as your individual in your district that went to a protest and is now upset about ugly things people have said on social media about her, she chose to go to that protest. She chose to participate in that activity. If people know who she is now, that's because she chose to participate in something that she was against. And she has every right to protest something, but those folks also have a right to say ugly things about her, because that's not against any type of First Amendment freedoms. or any other freedoms. Those individuals can say ugly things about her on social media if they choose to. And if she chooses to put herself in that position, then, I mean, I hate it for her, but that's just the way it is. There's no criminal charge for that.
Well, I suspect, again, I'm not a big city lawyer, and I suspect the big city lawyers might disagree with you on that last point, and could have a lot of conversation around some civil liberty issues, particularly around publishing of address, description, pictures of her car, and license plate, but we could let that one go for now. Well, so I guess this is just another example of the half-baked cake. Why don't we pull this and let's have the conversation? This didn't go to the Health Committee. I sure would have loved to have that conversation about protections for patients in the context of the Health Committee. That is my wheelhouse, and I'd love to have more conversation around that before we have to vote on this bill. Why would we? I would rather us have the conversation out in committees like that with knowledge or subject matter experts instead of in a conference committee where we won't get the chance to participate and we'll just see a final up or down vote on a conference committee report. Seems to me if we want to have light of day and transparency in important civil liberties questions like this one, that's what this is. It's a civil liberties question, but it's also about protection of the people or guarding against people in the three examples I mentioned. Why would we want to have that conversation in a series of committees, not in a conference committee?
Well, as a small country lawyer, not a big city lawyer, I don't know about the civil liberty issues that you express about the photos of the license plates and things like that, but I know there's nothing I ever studied at any time prior to the bar exam or in over 20 years of practicing law where posting someone's identifiable information would be a violation of their civil rights, number one. Number two, I don't know that the Healthcare Committee necessarily has experts serving on that committee. I serve on the Healthcare Committee. I am not a healthcare expert. I think there are a handful of other folks that are on this committee that also serve on that committee. I don't believe they're healthcare experts. They may have a little bit of knowledge of various things, but I don't know that putting it in front of that committee necessarily puts it in front of experts that can make the decisions we need to have made. But there are conversations around that topic, and I ask for your support on the bill at this time in lieu of Senator Newton not being here.
Thank you. Senator Chaudhry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Senator Britt, for answering Senator Woodard's three hypotheticals. I guess I just want to.
Well, they're not hypotheticals.
Well, they were. Well, thank you. Those were not hypotheticals. I was thinking more like a law student. But I guess I guess the question is Senator Rabin mentioned, because we're going to vote on the bill this afternoon, as to the first fact pattern that was cited by Senator Woodard. I mean, the bill as it now stands, if we elect to vote for it on the floor this afternoon, would penalize individuals, including Senator Woodard's constituent, that have elected to wear a mask for public health protections or purposes. Is that correct?
I believe it technically would, but I think in the officer's discretion and the prosecutor's discretion, I think they would have the opportunity rather to prosecute or not to prosecute based on those circumstances. And I would certainly believe that if that district attorney was presented with evidence that individual did in fact have that particular issue, then charges would not be prosecuted. But again, that is something that we are still working on.
Thank you.
Other members of the committee? Senator Crowley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Britt, if I understand it, this bill takes us back to pre-COVID with the exact same laws that we had then. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
And do you know how long that law has been in effect?
Senator Cromick, I think Senator Daniel may have looked at that part. I think it was the 50s, maybe 1953, and it was in reaction to activity by the Klan. Is why the law came into place. And again, I know that my Democrat colleagues may not have thought about some of these issues then that they're talking about now, or that their predecessors are talking about now, but that would essentially be the case. Yes, ma'am.
Follow up, Mr. Chairman.
Follow up. Keep on. You know how we do it.
So that law's been in effect for 60, 70 years. Are you aware of anybody ever having been charged with wearing a medical mask in public?
I am not aware of that, no.
Thank you.
Senator Berry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. When I think about issues coming up and someone having sincerely held concerns, I personally think they're easy to spot because they typically reach out to us before a committee meeting. You know, it's not about a surprise amendment that we know not going anywhere when you don't have the votes to support it. But I do want to offer that Senator Woodard has a history of engaging in those conversations in advance and trying to make changes and do so in a constructive manner. That's really the only way to change a bill. It's not by bringing a surprise amendment or, you know, throwing something out publicly and out of consideration for just the way he's always done business down here and been willing to have those conversations. Senator Woodard, I am willing to have ongoing conversations with you and communication about this issue. I think to Senator Britt's point, trying to thread the needle on that, realizing that this is an imperfect law, I think it's important to try to find the best ground we can on it. And I just appreciate all of your efforts over time. So I want to tell you I'm more than happy to have those conversations with you and my colleagues. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd just like to make a comment. So following up on what Senator Kravick said, you know, there was no health exception in state law for the history of this state until COVID happened. And I think the only reason that we considered doing that was because you had these egregious mask mandates that were being imposed across this state by, you know, state institutions, state elected officials. And so what was the legislature to do? You've got, you know, people imposing mask mandates that potentially put the citizens in violation of law. So I think the other issue here is that, you know, we don't really want to go back to an era when single elected officials or even unelected officials are making these unilateral decisions about what we have to do or not do. I mean, we could also have a health discussion about, are masks effective? Are the particles that we're concerned about smaller than the openings in these mask fibers and just passing through anyway? So I think as Senator Britt said, there's been no evidence that anybody in the history of the state was prosecuted for wearing a mask for health reasons. We're just returning the law back to pre-COVID status, and I think some of these concerns are just, they're sort of whatever the word is, aggravated. There you go. I need a big city lawyer to tell me that word. Jay. So that's my comment, Mr. Chair, and I just would move for a favorable at the appropriate time.
Thank you. I appreciate the discussion, but I think citing to what happened with regard to this law and people wearing masks for public health prior to COVID is completely irrelevant. The world is a different place. And whether you believe in masks or not, the life-saving mandates to wear masks did in fact do that, save lives, thousands of them, tens and thousands and probably hundreds of thousands. And we know that because in places like Florida, where mask mandates were in fact prohibited, their death rates were significantly higher than other states that didn't have mask mandates. So we can argue about the effectiveness of masks all day long. The truth is we have gone through a pandemic. We might go through another pandemic. Masks are a tool in the toolbox to keep people healthy. And I certainly know a number of people, because of their situation, their health situation, or the health situation of someone that they love and live with, that those people continue to wear masks on a daily basis. You might think that they're silly. You might think that it's completely ineffective and ridiculous. It is not to them. And if they're wearing it, it's because they feel like it's protecting them. And Senator Daniel, contrary to what you're talking about, this is not a situation where anybody is mandated to wear a mask anymore. In fact, what you're doing is mandating that if people want to express their First Amendment rights, they may not. we are removing people's freedom in this bill right now, as it stands, to exercise their freedom to protect themselves and wear a mask if they feel like they need to protect their health. So I'm not quite sure how we're getting from what this bill does right now, which is prevent people from doing something, to the mask mandates that you mentioned. It's a completely opposite situation. I certainly hope, it sounds like this provision is going to change, and that's good because it needs to.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Comment, then a question for the bill sponsor. I know masks have been used as a tool for healthcare and stuff, but masks are also a tool in the toolbox to do nefarious acts in businesses and public spaces too. So, got to weigh the balance on that. But Senator Britt, in North Carolina, do you know is it illegal to drive 47 in a 45-mile-per-hour zone?
Yes.
Have you ever seen a ticket or a charge for that at any point in time in your life?
You should never ask a question you don't want the answer to. Well, the real answer is I have. I have seen that happen before, but it was predicate to charging someone with a DWI,
Okay.
and they didn't actually charge for the speeding.
Okay, fair. You do know the answer for it. I should know the answer for it. The point being, a state trooper once told me that the biggest tool in their tool belt was discretion. I think most of the law enforcement would use discretion when faced with this type of situation. Thank you. Thank you for not. You're a truthful lawyer, by the way.
Thank you, Senator Dodd Johnson.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think for purposes of this committee, the evidence is irrefutable that this is a return to the law as it existed since 1954. The evidence is irrefutable that no one who was wearing a mask for health purposes has ever been arrested, convicted, for wearing that mask for health purposes. So we're ginning up a concern in a time when the world is different. And we're seeing people riot, we're seeing people protest, we're seeing people desecrate the American flag wearing masks. So it's time to put a stop to that. And I take the co-sponsors' word. They'll look at how to carve out an exception for health purposes if we really need one. But so I say for purposes of this committee, we ought to I move for a favorable, and we'll take it from there. And if we can improve upon it, let's absolutely do that. No one wants anyone wearing a mask strictly for health purposes to have to worry about being arrested. That's not what this bill is about.
But who was a former member of this committee and a good member of the Senate, used to say, no matter how thin you slice the bologna, there are always two sides. So I want everyone to think about that because it is very true. But my comment is that just this morning, for the other side of the bologna, I have received threats for running this bill today. My staff has received threats simply because we're running this bill today. And it is our job. And so if someone wants to threaten me or someone wants to threaten you, you're an elected official. For 13.9, by golly, you can stand up and take it. and that's what we're going to do. That's what we're going to do. I don't appreciate that, but it's part of life. It just is. And we're not going to satisfy everyone with this bill. I do think it has a purpose and a place, and I do think that people's rights to protect themselves and to ensure that they and their families are protected and safe from communicable diseases is no part of this. And I believe that. So I hope I have another threat by the time I get back to the office again. For 13.9 is worth it. So no more comments from the committee. I will open the floor to the public. And our first speaker is Tara Muller. Good morning. You have a couple of minutes to do anything except threaten the chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay? Thank you.
My name is Tara Muller. I'm a policy attorney at Disability Rights North Carolina. I'd like to extend our thanks. I'm really glad to hear today that the sponsors are willing to consider some changes to health and safety, and we're looking forward to seeing those. We, at Disability Rights North Carolina, we have already heard from people across the state who are very concerned about their own health and the health of their own children, especially parents of medically fragile children have been reaching out to us concerned that they will no longer be able to move about the world as they have been wearing masks. So even though the intent is not to arrest people who need a mask for medical reasons, for many disabled North Carolinians, the broad language, as it's written now, does mean that the government would bar them from public places.
Thank you, sir.
Again, we appreciate your willingness to consider some revisions, and we hope that the language is revised in a way to protect the freedoms of all North Carolinians. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Kevin Pittman. Good morning. Welcome.
Good morning. My name is Kerwin Pittman. I'm with Emancipate NC. To clarify a few things, the interpretation right now as it currently stands for this particular piece of legislation, if the Proud Boys are allowed to wear masks under this particular legislation as it stands right now, because they consider themselves a secret society and a fraternity. But also I might add that the Ku Klux Klan is also allowed to wear masks right now under this provision as it stands, as was admitted yesterday in judiciary. This bill, as it stands in its current form, is bad for several reasons. But I'm going to get to the meat and potato of it. As an organizer across the state that organizes individuals to exercise their constitutional rights, it is one provision in this bill that makes it a crime, particularly if something happened during a demonstration and it put the onus on the organizer. As somebody who's organized thousands of people, it is no way you could be held accountable for every single person, and you're not able to see every single person when demonstrations is going on. So that is kind of ludicrous to me. But most importantly, to strip away the rights of people to wear masks for safety and health concerns demonstrates a clear, reckless disregard for all the citizens of North Carolina, in my opinion. As bad as we may want to go back to an era pre-COVID, we just can't. We went through a pandemic, and we have to create new norms now in order to keep all the citizens of North Carolina safe. And I know we want to go back to it, but we just can't. Also, this piece of legislation does not set a clear and concise interpretation of it. So it leaves it up to the discretion of law enforcement when to enforce the mask policy and when not. We're right now at the beginning of this legislation that can be wrote in a clear and concise interpretation of how they should enforce this particular ban on masks. And I think as the authors of this bill, as those who can amend it, it is time now to put that in place. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Michael Oliver. Michael, oh, thank you. I didn't see you get up.
Good morning. Good morning. I'm just so glad to be here and be a part of this healthy discussion this morning. As you can see, I'm an African American. To leave it up to the discretion of an officer of African American peoples would be a travesty. We're already being harassed daily just because you're in this skin. And to leave it up to officers to say to you, your wife, and whatever, why you have on a mask is trouble. I'm also a community organizer where we do protest. We don't riot. There's a big difference in a protest that is peaceful and a riot. If I choose to have on a mask to protect my identity so I don't have the problem that this senator was talking about earlier, I think that should be protected. Because when things go back and forth on Facebook, Instagram, wherever they're doing these things, it's going to be a problem. Because everybody's not going to cower down and let people come at them, so we're creating another problem. The bill is a good bill to a certain extent because we're talking about criminals. We want to punish the criminals. Good people who were by the legislature, by this country that said, Simon says it's mandatory to wear a mask. We put on a mask. Now, Simon says take your mask off, but we're comfortable with our mask. There's a lot of people in their 50s and 60s now who are comfortable wearing their masks for protection. We need to protect our good citizens, and we need to deal with the criminals who are criminals accordingly, because they should be dealt with severely. But the good people should be applauded for being good in this country. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Anna Cambert or Lambert, good morning.
Good morning. My name is Anna Gombert. I am just a private citizen who lives here in Raleigh. As you can see, I wear a mask every day for my own health and safety. I love a lot and I want to protect myself. So I'm asking you all, there are no mask mandates. I'm not asking people that they have to wear a mask. All of the other tools that we have to protect ourselves I have to protect myself. I can still go to work. I can still participate in society because I wear a mask, and I'm not going to take an illness home to my vulnerable family members. I also would like to thank Senator Woodard for bringing up all of the lung transplant patients that come through Duke. Duke specializes in lung transplants, and correct me if I'm wrong, I believe it's a year that they are required to wear a mask after that transplant. Are you telling me that every single one of those people has to stay in their house for the entire year? You say that we won't be prosecuted, but if it's a law on the books, it will be.
Thank you. Heather Redding. Good morning.
Good morning. I'm speaking here as a private citizen and an organizer and an activist. The PCS to HB237 is yet again another anti-protest bill, and it is an unnecessary and excessive measure that will suppress free speech and further criminalize Black and brown communities. It is also rooted in a false narrative that protests are dangerous and that protesters are inherently criminal. Protesters wear masks for a number of reasons, medical included. Some protesters can't safely demonstrate in public because of violent threats that come with doxing. Others can't because if they are seen in media, their home life would be unsafe or they may lose their jobs. If enacted, HB237 would have a chilling effect on protesters' safety, constitutionally protected speech, and assembly. Regarding Section 3 of the bill, when protesters take to the streets, they participate in the long American political tradition of freedom of speech and civil disobedience. What's new is this effort to impose harsher penalties on protesters, which is another popular response by the General Assembly when oppressed people rise up. Never have I seen an anti-masking bill in the wake of hate groups like masked Proud Boys showing up to school board meetings or family-friendly drag story hours or pride events. This is clearly an act to suppress and penalize political dissent, which is unpatriotic and the antithesis to the democracy you say you cherish. I urge you to oppose HB 237.
Thank you. David Buzzard. David Buzzard. Okay, Liz Barber. Good morning. How are you, Liz?
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, Senators. I'm Liz Barber. I'm with the ACLU of North Carolina. First, I'd like to talk about the section that's gotten the most discussion, and that's the wearing the mask. Fully appreciate that this was the law before COVID. Now we're trying to change what's been the law for the last couple of years. And yesterday, we were all sort of joking that this would not be used to target Granny, that nobody's going to go and arrest Granny. I guess my question then is, why do we need it? Who are we going to target? And I suggest that it's going to be people who the cops don't like what they're doing, but it's not criminal. Those, correct me if I'm wrong, those are the people that this would, in fact, allow arrest and allow charging. Because otherwise, I'm not sure what the point is. The next section I want to talk about is 4A, which I think is unconstitutional. You, as the legislature, can and have, in 1965, the legislature, in response to the civil rights movement, I might add, criminalized lying or sitting or otherwise impeding traffic. That is currently a Class 2 misdemeanor. What this bill would do would be to further criminalize, to further penalize someone if you do that in the context of a demonstration. That is what the Constitution or the Supreme Court would say is content-based discrimination on speech, because you would take, let's say that there's a block party, right? Just some neighbors get together, the party falls into the street. That, under this definition, would be still just a Class 2 misdemeanor. However, if a bunch of people get together and take to the streets and protest, blocking traffic in an identical way, they would therefore be guilty of an A1 misdemeanor, and that's unconstitutional. Thank you.
Thank you. I will call David Buzzard again. Okay, that's the last call. We have another speaker and add-on. Simone Headington, is that correct? Good morning, thank you.
Good morning. I am here as a private citizen today. You can see that I wear a mask. I am immunocompromised. I do not make detectable antibody response to vaccination, which means that masking is one of the only ways of protecting myself, alongside, of course, not going in public places. This law would make it illegal for me to go in public spaces without my mask on, which is dangerous. I think that the argument that, well, the law, this has been on the books for many years and people weren't prosecuted for it. The problem is we live in different times and I do receive harassments. It only takes one bad actor, one person enforcing this, and if it is a law, it can be enforced, correct? I think, in terms of protests, what if I wanted to go and protest? Would I be allowed to in my mask? That then tells me that this is an unconstitutional law if I would not be able to go and protest with my mask on, because I would not be able to exercise my free speech. In addition to this, it's a violation of the ADA, because this is an accommodation that I need to go about my day. Laws need to say what they mean. When they are not clear, when they do not say what they mean, then it is up to the discretion of other people how they are enforced. That is dangerous given the bias that many people experience every day. Why get rid of an exemption that makes the law clearer? To actively go about getting rid of that exemption then tells me that people kind of are saying what they mean. And it's a dangerous thing that they're saying. Thank you.
Thank you. Concludes our public comment. Members of the committee, any further questions or comment? Bill sponsor, comments at all? The chair will entertain a motion. I have a motion from Senator Sawyer for a favorable report on House Bill 237, unmasking mobs and criminals. All in favor will please say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Motion carried.